Hey, thanks for clicking over. A few weeks ago, I read a book that had a powerful effect on me, and I wanted to go ahead and give you a summary of that book here. It's called The Culture Code by Daniel Coyle. The subtitle is Secrets of Highly Effective Teams. In the book, he talks about three different items and areas that we need to do if we want to establish effective teams. Really, everybody, no matter what you're doing, you're trying to put together great teams, even if it's just your family, honestly. And so the first thing out of the three is you have to establish safety. People need to feel safe on your teams. He used some samples in the book from World War One, particularly, where in World War One they had trench warfare, and it was just terrible, a hideous thing for both sides. And something happened one year, and at Christmas time they all stopped fighting. They actually came out and started singing together and celebrating Christmas together. He goes into the book into some detail talking about how they had social cues they were sending back and forth to each other that led them to feel like it would be okay to come out of these foxholes. Imagine being the first guy out of your foxhole. But again, they established an environment where there was safety. If we want to have great teams, the people on our teams have to feel safe. Secondly, there has to be a sense on our teams that people feel like we're sharing risk. They don't feel like they're out there all alone. He uses a really great example from the 1980s where an airplane crashed, which is not the great part of the example. But in the process of this airplane going down, the pilot, the co-pilot, and a passenger in the back who had some training in flying and what to do in disaster situations, these three guys got together and were able to bring this plane to a sort of controlled crash landing, and over 100 people survived that crash. They took the elements of that crash and they put them into a simulator later, and they took dozens of people and tried to get people to do the same thing. No one else was able to accomplish what these three people were able to accomplish. And Coyle, in his book, he asserts that what they did was they created a situation where they almost created a hive mind. And he highlights the fact that they gave these short bursts of communication. The pilot would say things like, how are we going to get the landing gear down? Any ideas? In other words, he created a situation where he wasn't barking out orders and telling everybody what to do, but rather everybody felt like they were all in this together, and they could say stuff, and it would be listened to, and it would be implemented, and we would try to work on what you said to work on. So in our groups, we have to find ways for them to be safe, for sure. But two, we have to find ways that they feel like we're all in this together. We're all sharing this together. The third thing that he talks about is every group needs to have an established purpose or an established vision. In the book, he goes through a lot of different examples. It's a wonderful book. But specifically, he talks about the company Johnson & Johnson. And years ago, they had a new president. And when the president came in at Johnson & Johnson, he looked at their corporate philosophy, their vision, and it was very high-minded. It talked about how we exist to help doctors and nurses, and how we are there to help families and with their health needs. And he questioned whether Johnson & Johnson was really about that. So he started having a lot of meetings with higher-ups, middle-level managers, and he talked about it. Are you sure that this is what we're all about, or are we just about making money? And they went through a very long process. In the end of the process, they all actually came to grips with the fact that no, they wanted their corporate philosophy, and their corporate philosophy wasn't just something wanted, but they were a company that believed in helping doctors and nurses and families with their healthcare needs. Well, if you flash forward in time, shortly after that, in the 80s, we had the Tylenol scare, where someone was taking Tylenol bottles on the shelf and they were putting poison in the bottles, and people were dying. And when this happened, the FDA came out, Food and Drug Administration came out, and it said that they cleared Johnson & Johnson of any wrongdoing. And Johnson & Johnson was in a situation where they could have chosen to just say, well, we're not guilty of anything, and they could have sat back and just let things play out. But instead, because their corporate vision was so strong, and they really believed that they were there to help doctors and nurses and families, and be believed in that 100%, and that was all the way through. Because they believed in this, they put millions of dollars into restructuring the way they made Tylenol bottles, into making tamper-resistant caps and things like that. And what ended up happening was Tylenol was a brand that most people would have said during the poisoning scares that Tylenol was done. You were never going to be able to sell Tylenol again in this country. But because Johnson & Johnson had that vision, and they all believed in that vision, they were able to come up with this new packaging and sell that, and they only saw a momentary dip in Tylenol sales, and then it went back up again. And of course, Tylenol you can get on the shelves today. It's a success story, and not only is it a success story, but it is seen by many in the industry. Whenever a company has an issue similar to this, they use what they did at Johnson & Johnson as a model to propel them forward. So 3 things you got to do if you're going to establish great teams. 1, got to make people feel safe. 2, you have to create an environment where people feel like they're sharing risk. 3, you have to have a shared vision. It's worth taking the time to figure out how to make these things happen. Everybody's in a group. Everybody's part of a group or leading a group. Let's go out and make some great things happen. And hey, read some good books. Look forward to seeing your comments below. If you like the video, of course, hit the like button. Feel free to comment. We can have a discussion below. Lots of great things you can read and listen to out there to grow as a leader. I encourage you, go out there and grow.